Hello everyone, this lesson continues on perspective and we're studying brush ruling as well. So, adding on to what we have previously talked about with a left vanishing point and a right vanishing point, I just wanted to add something a little different on this side to help you reinforce what's happening. So first of all, I'm going to have a little bit of, or just a tiled area coming out here. So remember, we're either projecting from or to one vanishing point or the other. I'm going to project from the right along, so I'm continuing this front face on the ground. And then I choose to stop it here. It has to go back to the same vanishing point if it's a rectangular paving section. If it was a curved or different, the rule would be slightly changed, but at this stage we'll just, take things easy to begin with. And then I come through that back point out until they're going to intersect. Now, if I wanted to create some pavers, remember what we did with the windows last week, I could do exactly the same thing. I could crisscross the diagonals, and that gives me a center point. What do? Well, I take the center point from the vanishing point through, and if I want it to be even, I take it from the other vanishing point through as well. Now, I wanted to show you this because this is the point of difference with perspective. I'm just going to bring it up a little high, maybe not. Yeah, there. This quarter here is the same size in reality as this quarter here, but it does not seem so. They're all the same. If it was a rectangle, it would be perfectly cut into four. But because of perspective, remember the other rule that things that are closest to you appear larger than the same things that are further away, because we've dramatically increased the depth of that horizon. When you stand on the beach and you look at the horizon of the ocean, it's actually 3.8 kilometers away. And yet we would have this here, we'd have a tiny boat here if it was even halfway to the horizon. So we've dramatically reduced that actual distance by this representation. So that's something you must be aware of. Don't be tricked out of thinking that you've done it wrong and making it exactly halfway here, because it will actually look wrong when you do it. So I'm going to crisscross these diagonals because I do want to find my center point on this wall. And there it is, straight up from there. So that's going to be like the center of my door. If I wanted to find the right width of my door, I could project from this vanishing point across to how wide I think I might want it to look. And where it hits that point and that point, I can go straight up. And that's going to give me, again, that distance and that distance and that distance. They all look less as they go away from us. Up here, though, I want to draw an awning. So I'm going to project from the left vanishing point, and I've just made a line on my wall as to where the top of the awning will attach. Now, when you want to do something like an awning, you've got different options. Does it come straight out? Does it angle down? I'm just going to make it angle down a little bit. So I'm going to choose the angle that it will angle down. Once I've got that depth, where do I go? First of all, I'm going to go straight back to my vanishing point. Now, with this one, again, third point, there's another depth of perspective, believe it or not. We've got two vanishing points. There is a third vanishing point, which is vertical perspective. It's way too complicated to introduce yet. So I'm going to try and just keep this line parallel. If you change it at all, you change it to be slightly flatter, not steeper. Okay? And now that can't just sit out there in the middle of nowhere by itself. So what must it do? Well, I'm going to continue this line down on this wall as if it was a support bar. And from this point, I go back to the other vanishing point. So if you can see, you just get into the habit of going from one vanishing point or both through the point that we've created. So even if I wanted to find the bottom of this curve, I would go back to the vanishing point to find it. And there it is, directly down from here. There's the bottom of that curve up in the end. I'll colour that in now, and hopefully that will make a little bit more sense as I do the colouring. Now, I talked about last week I was going to do brush ruling. I use brush ruling a lot. What brush ruling is a technique where you hold steady a ruler down on the paper in a fixed position. Then you glide the brush along the straight edge of the ruler, and that will give you a very controlled straight line. It does take lots of practice, like pretty much everything I've been telling you, but I'll give you a few tips. Just watch me do it first. I'll give you a few tips as to how it can be very much easier than just practicing. It's very helpful if you're not, if you're a little bit shaky now like me and not too neat. It will help you very much. So I might even use it here. I'll also use it on the bars. I'm going to go into a vertical. Sorry. And I might even colour in my door in the background. Now I've got to get a little bit of return wall in there. So remember, just like the windows were set back, this door would be slightly set back. So I don't think I have that colour anymore, but that's okay. I'm just going to wash in a little bit of a darker. And you can use brush ruling absolutely everywhere if you wanted to. But look, I won't do too much on it because it takes away the freedom of watercolour. I'm an architectural illustrator by trade, so my version of this is now getting quite tight, but I just wanted to show you the use of that technique. So on the floor now, I'm just wetting the area where I had the tiles, throwing in a bit of colour. What I'm doing is I'm putting a bit of shade of the building in there. I'm going to go in here and try and match this colour a little bit. And now that it's dried, I can actually show you how I've lost my lines a little bit. So I'm just going to go, I can just see the halfway there. I'm just going to show you how I would use the dry brush technique, and typically you want to be using a brush that can give you a point. Your bristles are at a point, or I quite often use a rigger or a liner brush. Sorry, this is very old, as you can see, but it gives you a very good point, and it can give you a very fine line as well. So I'm just going to put some grout lines in now. They're going to be really dark. This isn't like a proper scene, but I just want to show you again the technique. I'm laying 3 fingers down so that this is actually flat on the paper, this section here. When I turn over, you can see then that I am really, I'll try and, that's the view. So I'm pushing down on the paper to hold the bottom, this section of the ruler, down flat. Then that gives me the ability to move it. I line it up by eye, and what I do is once I've laid it down as flat as I can, using my thumb to push this bottom part down, I then can see where I'm going to draw my line. So you see I do a rehearsal hovering above where my lines are going to go, and then I can put my line down, and it can be very faint or as heavy as I want. I'll muck around with this a bit and show you I can still do a wobbly line with this technique with more control than normal. So I've got my ruler set down, my fingers are really pressing firmly, and what I want to get is the metal part of the brush. That's going to slide the easiest. So that's the part I actually want sliding against the edge of the ruler. And at the end of the day, when I was working, I used to get a real ridge in this, in this finger, because it actually shows you how much pressure, because if you have a look, that finger is also gliding along the top part of the brush. It's probably best to get a wider brush, a wider ruler than what I'm using. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a wobbly look here, to show you that you can still do a wobbly and dots and dashes with this technique. It's not just for very, very stringent straight lines. Now I'm turning the whole thing and going from this vanishing point through, that's my halfway point there. So I turn it until when I hover, I can see it's going to go exactly, and all I have to do then is lay it down a tiny bit more for it to hit the paper. Now you don't have to do this, it's very specific. You can even use a watercolour pencil to do that. But it is helpful in times of, well, I use it to do tile lines as well, because I get that little, almost a uniform wobble on the edge of the tiles. The other thing I would use it for quite often, and I'll use a different brush because that one's a bit wobbly, it's so old. That's something I recommend, never throw out old brushes. You never know when they come in perfectly handy for a specific painting. So I'm going to do it here. I'm going back to the vanishing point, lining it up, laying it down as heavily as I can, and then there's my window mullions, my window frames. It takes a lot of practice to do this vertically as well as just a lot of practice until you feel comfortable with it. Once you do, you'll find you can use it all the time. But just be careful, as I said, it kind of firms everything up for a watercolour, and I now usually prefer to not be so firm with my lining, but I just thought I'd teach you that today. Okay. I hope you can join me next week for dry brush technique.